Hello, everyone. My name is Nina Holatova, and I am a lawyer and project coordinator at the Community Legal Education Association, or CLEA, which is located in Winnipeg, Manitoba. CLEA is a not-for-profit organization, and we offer legal education, information, and other resources across the province. Today's presentation is going to be about elder abuse and seniors' rights. The contents of today's presentation are meant to serve as general information only and do not constitute legal advice. If you do require legal information or advice about your specific situation and you do not have a lawyer, you can feel free to contact our law phone-in and lawyer referral program for free legal information. That being said, we have a lot of information to cover in today's presentation, so let's go ahead and jump right in. We're going to cover several topics today, including what elder abuse is, its various forms, and some warning signs or indicators to look for when someone around you is experiencing abuse. We're also going to talk about financial scams and how they've evolved with technological advancements. We're going to discuss what you can do to protect yourself by understanding your rights and taking some basic precautions. I will also provide some very basic information on essential legal documents, such as wills, powers of attorney, and healthcare directives. And these are documents that everyone should consider to ensure that they are protected. Lastly, I'm going to go over some resources and supports if anyone requires any further information. So elder abuse essentially refers to any intentional harm, mistreatment, or neglect that occurs to an older adult. Elder abuse can take many forms, and it can happen in a variety of settings, such as the home or the community, or in care facilities or hospitals. Elder abuse often happens in a relationship where there is an expectation of trust or where someone has control or influence over an older person. So, for example, if an older person is dependent on someone else for things like financial support or housing, the abuser might use this as leverage to intimidate, to humiliate, coerce, or just to make the senior feel powerless to do anything. Generally, someone in a position of trust is more likely to have access to the older person's finances, property, or personal information. They might also have a close relationship with the older person, so that can make it easier for them to gain their trust and manipulate or control them. Abusers may also feel a sense of entitlement to the older person's assets, or they might be motivated by financial gain. In some cases, the abuser may feel burdened by the responsibilities of caring for the older person, and they might take out their frustrations on them. There are also a lot of misconceptions about elder abuse that can hinder prevention and intervention efforts. So, for example, many people think that elder abuse only happens in care facilities. While it's true that abuse can certainly happen in these settings, it can also occur in the home or in the community or in other settings. Some people believe that elder abuse only happens to people who are very, very old or who have some sort of cognitive or physical impairments. And although these individuals may be more vulnerable to abuse, anyone can be a victim of elder abuse. It can happen to anyone, regardless of their age or their health status. Another common misconception is that elder abuse is a private family matter. Some people see it as something that occurs within a family, so it should be dealt with within that family. Of course, it's important to recognize that elder abuse is often a crime and should be reported to the authorities. And while family members may be involved in elder abuse cases, the priority should always be on the victim to ensure that they receive the support that they need and to hold perpetrators accountable. Unfortunately, elder abuse is often underreported. There are a whole host of factors that contribute to this, some of which I've already touched on and relate to some of those misconceptions that I talked about. So one reason that people may not report is shame or embarrassment. Elderly victims of abuse may feel ashamed or embarrassed about their situation, especially if the abuser is a family member or caregiver. Another reason is fear of retaliation. So elderly victims may be afraid of what their abuser will do if they speak out or if they report the abuse. They might worry about losing their home, their financial support, or their independence. Cognitive decline can also be a barrier to reporting elder abuse. Elderly victims may have memory problems or other cognitive impairments that make it difficult for them to recognize or be able to report the abuse. Social isolation is another factor. Elderly victims may be socially isolated and lack a support system to turn to for help. They may also be more vulnerable to manipulation and control by their abuser. Lack of awareness or resources can also be a barrier. Elderly victims may not know where to turn to for help, or they may lack the physical or financial means to be able to seek assistance. Finally, cultural and language barriers can prevent reporting. Elderly victims from certain cultural or language backgrounds may face additional barriers when it comes to reporting abuse, such as a lack of knowledge about their rights or a fear of discrimination. For all of these reasons, it is very important to talk about elder abuse and have these conversations. It is a significant and growing problem that affects a vulnerable and often marginalized group of people. And by discussing elder abuse, we can not only raise awareness of the issues, but we can help to prevent and address incidents of abuse as well. Next, we'll talk about the different types of elder abuse. Elder abuse can include a very broad range of behaviors, events, and circumstances. It can be an isolated incident where it happens only once, but it is much more common for it to be recurrent or ongoing, meaning it tends to be a pattern. Some types of elder abuse, like financial, physical, or sexual abuse, are considered a crime, while others, like psychological abuse, may not be a crime. There's no specific crime called seniors abuse or elder abuse. Rather, the act has to fall under one of the existing provisions of the criminal code in order to be considered a crime. The first type of elder abuse I'm going to talk about is physical abuse. Sometimes this can be things that are fairly obvious or evident, such as hitting, slapping, or pushing, or any sort of use of physical force to harm or control an elderly person. Things like restraint or confinement. This can include things like tying someone to a bed or a chair, otherwise restricting their movement, locking them in a room, and so on. Sexual abuse can also fall under physical abuse. This can include any unwanted or non-consensual sexual contact or activity. And of course, there can be non-physical forms of sexual abuse as well, which I'll cover in a couple of slides. It can also include things like withholding food or water or medication, so intentionally depriving an elderly person of basic needs. Rough handling can also be a form of physical abuse. So this can include being handled in a way that causes pain or discomfort, such as being shaken or pulled. And also over medication. This can include administering medication in excessive amounts or using medication as a form of control or punishment. So especially if we see someone on, for example, sedative type medications, sometimes we will see that they might be over medicated in order to keep them sort of sedate and more easily manipulated. Physical abuse is considered a crime and it should be reported to the police. Psychological abuse can take many different forms. One type of psychological abuse is verbal abuse, which involves using hurtful or demeaning language, yelling or insulting an elderly person. Threats or intimidation can be another form of psychological abuse. This involves using fear or intimidation tactics to control or manipulate someone. Things like ignoring or isolating an elderly person or limiting their access to friends and family can also be a form of psychological abuse. Sometimes psychological abuse can involve denying privacy in institutions or maybe limiting someone's decision-making power, even though they are still competent to make those decisions themselves. When it comes to allowing someone else to make decisions for an elderly person, there are proper ways to do that, such as through a healthcare directive or a power of attorney. However, it is important to watch out for inappropriately limiting someone's decision-making power when they are in fact competent. This kind of control and manipulation can cause an elderly person to become isolated and, again, less likely to access those necessary resources. Another form of psychological abuse can be refusing access to grandchildren. When it comes to that, there are options available through family resolution services and through the courts for grandparents or other family members who are seeking contact with a child but are not the child's parents. That being said, this is certainly a control, and manipulation tactics. Psychological abuse can be a crime, but it is not always a crime. Next, we have sexual abuse. So sexual abuse includes any type of non-consensual sexual contact. This can include unwanted sexual touching or kissing or intercourse. However, there are many types of sexual abuse that do not have a physical component to them. This can include things like making sexual remarks or using sexualized language towards somebody. It can also include things like exhibitionism or forcing an older adult to view or participate in pornography. Sometimes this can also include a lack of personal privacy. So, for example, when someone is changing or using the bathroom or bathing, although that may be subject to certain safety requirements. However, it's important to know that sexual abuse is a crime and should be reported to the police if it's occurring. Financial abuse is the most commonly reported form of elder abuse in Canada, and it includes a whole host of different things. Some of them are pretty obvious, like stealing money or property, so taking valuables without permission or using someone else's credit card or bank account without their knowledge. Things like forging signatures or manipulating documents, so signing someone else's name on a check or a contract. Or other legal documents without their consent, or altering important documents to gain control over someone's finances, scams and frauds, so things like fake investment opportunities, lottery or prize scams, or identity theft. You might also see coercion and manipulation and other forms of emotional abuse being used to further or perpetrate financial abuse. So, pressuring someone to make financial decisions or changes that are not in their best interests, or using emotional or psychological tactics to gain control over someone's finances. Misusing a power of attorney. So this can include using that legal authority that a power of attorney has to make financial decisions that benefit the abuser rather than the elderly person. Another example can be charging someone for an unnecessary or inflated service, such as home repairs or financial planning services or insurance policies. Abusing joint accounts. So if someone has a joint account with an elderly person, they might withdraw money without the other person's consent, or they might use the account to somehow hide assets or income. And last on the list is forcing someone to sign legal documents that they do not understand. So we can see how financial abuse really refers to a really broad range of crimes and behaviors and actions. The next type of elder abuse is neglect. So there are generally two different types of neglect that the literature differentiates between, and that is active neglect and passive neglect. Active neglect refers to a situation where someone intentionally withholds necessary care or support from an elderly person. So, for example, a caregiver might intentionally withhold food or water or medical care from an elderly person in order to control them or harm them. Passive neglect, on the other hand, is seen as more unintentional. So it still refers to a situation where an individual fails to provide the necessary care or support for an elderly person, but rather than being intentional to harm the person, maybe it's because of a lack of knowledge or expertise. Passive neglect can happen for a variety of reasons, including, as I said, lack of knowledge. So sometimes caregivers or family members, they may not be aware of the needs of the elderly person, or they may not know how to provide the necessary care, especially in situations where the elderly person has more intensive medical needs. Another reason is a lack of resources. So sometimes a caregiver or family member may not have the resources or the financial means to provide for the elderly person's needs, like medical care or home modifications or even transportation. Caregiver burnout is another factor. Caring for an elderly person can be physically and emotionally demanding and challenging, and caregivers may become overwhelmed or burned out, leading to neglect. And lastly, sometimes family conflict or estrangement can lead to neglect, as family members may be unwilling or unable to provide care or support to an elderly relative. Examples of neglect include failure to provide things like food and water, shelter, clothing, medication or medical attention, as well as medical aids like glasses, hearing aids, walkers, etc., and also hygiene needs. Neglect tends to be more common in situations where someone has physical or mental limitations and is reliant on another person for their basic needs. And generally, those who are socially isolated and those with serious health conditions are the most vulnerable. Keep in mind that even in cases where neglect is passive or unintentional, it is very serious and can often require immediate intervention. The last type of elder abuse that I'm going to talk about is violation of human rights. So, this is the denial of an older person's fundamental rights according to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms or other provincial legislation. And examples of this include things like withholding information, denying privacy, visitors or religious worship, restricting liberty, or unwarranted confinement to a hospital or another institution. Under Manitoba's Human Rights Code, everyone has the right not to be discriminated against when receiving a service or an accommodation. So this means that a service provider cannot treat you differently just because of things like your age, a physical or mental disability, or a related characteristic such as needing a wheelchair or a hearing aid. This law applies to people or companies that provide housing, long-term care, medical treatment, legal services, and many other types of services. If you live in a personal care home, you also have some additional rights under Manitoba law. So the right to be treated with courtesy and respect, the right to a reasonable amount of privacy, the right to meet with a legal representative in private, the right to give or refuse consent to medical treatment, and a few others. Some of these are subject to certain safety requirements and the privacy of other people living in the care home as well. However, personal care homes must have a policy in place to deal with any allegations of abuse, and information about making a complaint must be prominently displayed and easy to access. Next, we're going to talk about some of the warning signs of elder abuse. So there are several warning signs of elder abuse that can help identify if an elderly person is being mistreated. These signs include things like unexplained injuries, such as bruises, cuts, or burns, especially if they appear in a pattern or if they appear frequently. Changes in behavior or mood, such as becoming withdrawn or anxious or showing signs of depression or fear. Sudden changes in financial situation, including unexplained withdrawals from bank accounts, changes in wills, or loss of property or possessions. Unexplained changes in relationships with friends or family, including a sudden lack of contact with loved ones, or unusual or inappropriate behavior by a caregiver. So things like making inappropriate comments, seemingly controlling what the other person is doing, and so on. Now, as I mentioned, financial abuse is the most highly reported form of abuse against older adults. We also already know that elder abuse is severely underreported, so that means that there are likely many more cases of financial abuse than we can even begin to imagine. However, there are a few things that you can do to protect your finances, and these are great tips for anyone. The first thing you can do is make plans now. Make plans regarding your finances ahead of time as much as possible. Even if you don't think you're going to need assistance for many years, start making decisions now as to who is going to help you manage important decisions, such as those related to finances when the time comes. Making that plan and asking that person if they are willing to help can prevent you from being scammed in the future or taken advantage of by someone who may see your need as financial opportunity. This also ensures that the person making those decisions for you down the line was someone who is specifically chosen by you because you trust them, rather than someone who has been maybe appointed by the court who may not have been your first choice. This also means discussing plans with a trusted family member or friend, so that someone is aware of what your intentions are and what your plan is. So this way you have some extra sets of eyes on what is going on. And this may also involve having, again, those important legal documents like a power of attorney, healthcare directive, and will put into place. We're going to talk a little bit more about the purpose of each of these documents, but the bottom line is that they are very, very useful tools to ensure that your wishes are going to be respected and your instructions are followed, whether that has to do with financial decisions or even medical ones. Lastly, absolutely never sign anything without fully understanding it. Read all documents carefully and never sign anything that you do not fully understand or agree with. You should never feel pressured to agree to something or to sign something that you're not sure about. And if you have any questions or doubts, it's always better to give yourself time to get another opinion so you can have peace of mind about what's going on. Next, it's always important to keep a hand in what's going on. So this means giving up your assets and property only when you decide that you can't manage them anymore. Even if you do plan on turning over the financial reins to someone else later on in life, you should still be trying to review banking and credit card statements yourself as well if you can, for as long as you can. You should also arrange to have things like pension checks, old age security, or any other forms of income to be deposited into your own account. And this not only ensures that you are going to have access to your accounts and your finances, but it also makes it easier to track what is actually going on in those accounts, the transactions, if there are any withdrawals, and so on. Some resources also recommend being wary of someone like a relative who you've never been very close to in the past, who suddenly becomes very friendly with you right at the time that you need help, or takes a sudden interest in your finances. And lastly, it's a really good idea to keep accurate records, accounts, and lists of property and assets for review by someone you trust. This way, if anything ever happens and you do need help managing your finances, you have taken steps to make sure it's done by someone you trust and that they are in the best position possible to be able to do so. Now, one of the ways that we can plan and prepare for the future is to put important legal documents into place, like the will, the power of attorney, and the healthcare directive. And the purpose of these documents is really to ensure that your wishes are known, even if and when you are no longer able to express them. Keep in mind that you should always consult with a lawyer prior to signing any legal documents. And in case of a healthcare directive, you may want to talk to your doctor or another medical professional as well. So let's talk about the will first. A will is a written document that controls what happens to a person's property after they die. So the person who has made the will is called the testator, or sometimes if they're female, they're referred to as testatrix, but you'll hear testator more commonly. You also have the executor. This is the person named in the will who is going to look after the estate. They are going to be responsible for making sure that any debts are paid and for distributing the property according to the will. Having a will is important because it disposes of your property the way that you want, and it also covers unforeseen circumstances in your life. So people commonly say, well, I don't think I have anything of value. I don't have any real money or assets. So what is the point of making a will? However, even in those situations, a will can be helpful because it allows you to take care of items of sentimental value, but it also deals with property that you might inherit right before death, or money acquired at death through life insurance or pension benefits or court awards. If you die without a will, then your property is going to be distributed according to the Intestate Succession Act. And the Intestate Succession Act, or ISA, has a set formula for distributing the property of someone who doesn't have a will. So this means that if you have a surviving spouse or a common law partner, and either no children or you have children with that person, then all of your assets and property are going to go to that spouse or common law partner. If you have a surviving spouse or common law partner, but you also have children from a previous relationship, not with that current spouse or common law partner, then it changes a little bit. So the surviving spouse or common law partner is then going to be entitled to either the first $50,000 or half of the estate, whichever is larger. So these are all important things to keep in mind, because if you want your property distributed a certain way, you're definitely going to want a will in place. Next, we have the power of attorney, and this is a document that allows someone else to take care of your legal and financial affairs on your behalf. There are a few different types of powers of attorney. One is called a specific power of attorney, which is used for a specific task, like selling an asset. And when that task is completed, or the donor is no longer mentally competent, then that power of attorney would end. We also have a general power of attorney, and this allows the attorney to make decisions about all of the donor's business and financial affairs. They can also manage the donor's banking and investments, sign all documents regarding the donor's property, etc. However, the general power of attorney also ends if the donor becomes mentally incompetent. Lastly, we have the enduring power of attorney, which is the most common type. And this is the kind that most people get because authority continues even if the donor becomes mentally incapable. The enduring power of attorney can come into effect immediately, but if you're still competent, you can, of course, continue to look after your own affairs. A slightly different variation of this is called a springing power of attorney, which only comes into effect once a certain specific event takes place. So, for example, once your doctor declares you mentally incompetent, or you can choose to have it come into effect at a specified later date. The last document that we're going to talk about here is the Healthcare Directive. This is a written document that allows you to give your specific instructions as to the level and type of medical treatment that you want performed in the case that you cannot indicate your wishes, either because of mental incapacity or an inability to communicate. It also allows you to appoint another person called a proxy to make healthcare decisions for you if you're not able to do so. So I know I've talked about scams a little bit already, but I do want to touch on it one more time, just because I think we're all a little bit guilty of thinking that it could never happen to us or we would never fall for something like that. And unfortunately, it's just not the case. Especially as new technological advancements are made, it seems like the scams are getting more clever and more intricate every single day. So I want to talk about a few examples of common but maybe lesser known financial scams that you should be aware of. So first, we have a variety of investment scams. Sometimes scammers will buy a large number of shares in a little known or smaller company, and then they might spread false or misleading information about that company to inflate its stock price. And once that stock price goes up, then scammers will sell their shares for a profit, which leaves other investors with essentially worthless stocks. You might also see scammers where they just straight up take money from people, promise to invest it, they promise these huge returns, and then, of course, disappear with the person's money. So always be wary of financial schemes where it seems like you're going to get a return that is almost too good to be true. So if you are planning on investing, do your own research, make sure that what you're investing in is legitimate, because you will sometimes see people who put their entire life savings into these fake fraudulent investment scams, thinking that it's going to give them a huge return and set them up for retirement. And unfortunately, they end up losing that money. The next one that I want to talk about is referred to as the grandparent scam. And in this scam, the person essentially poses as a grandchild or another relative in distress, and they contact an elderly person claiming that they need money urgently. The scammer then asks the elderly person to send money through a wire transfer or a prepaid debit card. This scam is also getting a little bit more elaborate. Now there's artificial intelligence technology that they can use to actually mimic someone's voice, and it's so realistic that you wouldn't even know the difference and you think it's actually your family member calling you. So with all of that being said, I want to encourage everyone to stay connected, because I really do believe that this is the best way to prevent elder abuse and other forms of abuse. As I mentioned earlier, isolation is often a tactic that abusers will use to get someone alone and unable to seek help or reach out. So by participating in community activities, having your own telephone, being able to receive and send your own mail, and really just having a wide support system in place, it's going to enable you to have that network so that if you do find yourself in a situation where you need help or support or assistance, there will be somebody for you to reach out to. And of course, in Manitoba, we also have some great resources for anybody dealing with elder abuse or other seniors issues. So Clinic has their senior abuse support line, which is open during business hours. And outside of business hours, they also have their 24-hour crisis line. Age and Opportunity, or ANO support services, also offer a broad range of supports and services to those dealing with seniors issues, including a safe housing program. So I've left their Winnipeg number, their toll-free number, as well as their email address up on the screen. If you suspect abuse in a care home or a hospital, you can contact the Protection for Persons in Care office, or PPCO. So this is their Winnipeg number as well as their toll-free number. For human rights complaints, you can reach out to the Manitoba Human Rights Commission. Again, both numbers are here. For more information about financial scams and fraud, you can visit either the Manitoba Securities Commission website or the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre website. And lastly, we have the contact information for the Community Legal Education Association. I have here the phone number and the email address for our law phone-in and lawyer referral program, and the link to our website as well. I hope you found today's presentation to be informative and helpful. And if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you everyone for watching.